The weather this weekend is absolutely atrocious. We've got rain, we've got wind, and really ugly flat light. So I'm quite thin on the ground for landscape photography options. But in my experience, waterfalls work pretty well in conditions like this. So let's get cracking. Now I've got no idea what this waterfall's called. I've never visited it before, I've never photographed it before. So yeah, today should be pretty interesting. I'll just take you in a little bit closer here to where my camera is already set up. Let's just make sure I don't fall into the water. You'll have to excuse the background noise. That's always an issue on waterfall shoots. Now, you can see my camera set up just there. And I've got it set up in portrait on an L bracket on a tripod. And really, the composition I'm going for is pretty straightforward. The waterfall, there's not too much to it. It's about 6 or 7 meters tall, and I'm getting the entirety of the waterfall right from the top. Right, I never get the hang of this whole finger on the LCD thing. Right to the bottom, and I'm getting it all within one shot. And what's really caught my attention here is two things. You can see with the waterfall, it kind of steps down on these rocks here, which means there's not just one cascade of water, there's lots of kind of sub-cascades that make the bigger waterfall itself. But more importantly than that, if you look, you can see the really dark, contrasty rock that the water flows over. And I think this is going to lend itself tremendously well to a high contrast black and white shot. So that's exactly what I'm going for. In terms of settings, my setup is pretty straightforward. I'm shooting at f11, half a second, ISO 64 at 28mm, and I've also got a circular polariser on the front. You can see it just there. That allows me to take the glare off this background rock here and boost the contrast, which is going to lend itself to the black and white edit. Now, the half a second exposure time that I've gone for is, I tend to find it's perfect for waterfalls. It allows me to get the movement in the water but still retain that element of detail in the water. I'm not smoothing it out too much so it looks like a feather, like candy floss. I want to retain some detail and interest in that flowing water and not blow out the highlights of it. So I tend to find in my experience half a second is that nice sweet spot. Because I'm shooting at f11 here and everything's kind of along the same sort of vertical plane, there's going to be no need to focus stack. I'm getting everything sharp in one exposure here. And in terms of where I'm focusing, probably about here. And I think that's given me the required depth to get the top of the waterfall and the bottom nice and razor sharp. I've also got the camera set up on a 2-second timer, which allows me to press the shutter release button, take my hands away from the camera, the vibrations dissipate, it steadies itself, and then it takes the image. And again, that lends itself to nice sharp images. So I think we're ready to actually take this image. Done. I'm really happy with that image, but I think I might have actually found something stronger. Quite often with landscape photography, you'll actually find your strongest images when you're not searching for them too hard, and that's exactly the case here. I was just about to pack up and leave, and I spotted this image. So you can see my camera set up just down here under these bushes in a really precarious position. I'll take you in a bit closer, but there's a high chance I might slip in the river here. Great, got there. So you can see right behind me, my camera set up here really low to the river, right in against the side, almost in the actual bramble bushes that are in this area. An LCD and live view comes into its own in circumstances like this. There's no chance that I'd be able to line up the composition with the viewfinder. Now what I'm really interested in here is we've got a foreground, the river running over these pebbles here, really, really eye-catching, and I think combined in an image, flanked by that waterfall, I think we've got potential for an image that has interest right through the scene, and it's quite different. I've certainly never seen an image like that taken at this particular waterfall. In terms of settings, I'll probably be able to shoot this at exactly the same settings that I caught the first image at. The real difference here is going to be that I'm not going to be able to get this image sharp in one exposure. The depth of field is not going to be sufficient at f11. So I'm going to need to focus stack this, and I'm probably going to go for a 3 image focus stack. Just to be safe. Usually with focus stacking you're better taking more images than less. Now the first image I am going to focus down on the actual pebbles right here. The second image I'm going to go on the foreground, on the midground about there, and the final image back on the actual waterfall itself. And by compiling those 3 images in post-processing, I'll be able to get pin sharpness throughout this image. I've arrived at the next waterfall. You can see it right behind me, and the weather's starting to get a lot worse. The rain's really starting to come down now, so I'm really going to have to get a move on. The waterfall behind me is a lot more famous here. This is about 20 meters tall, and it's called Spewit Vein, I believe. Don't hold me to that pronunciation, I'm useless at it. But I've actually got my camera set up right behind me, just there. So I'll take you in a little bit closer and I'll talk you through the settings and composition that I found. Now my thought process with this image is quite similar to the thought process that I went through for the second shot at the last waterfall. I want to try and get some foreground in there because I don't believe the waterfall itself is sufficient in order to make an effective eye-catching image here. So I've set up my tripod here and I've got down nice and low, and I'm shooting portrait again. And what I'm trying to capture is, you can see just there, this little cascade of water flowing through the foreground. That's going to make the foreground of my image. And then obviously the waterfall is going to sit in the backdrop. Again, I'm going to probably need to focus stack this. Probably looking at 3 image focus stack again in order to get sufficient sharpness throughout. Settings wise, I'm pretty much the same. The only difference is I've had to open the aperture a little bit wider because the light levels are dropping off. So I'm now shooting at f8, half a second again, about 24mm at ISO 64 with a circular polariser on the front again to take the glare off the rocks and water. Water leading up through the foreground to the background waterfall acts as a beautiful leading line through the middle of the shot. Now I did try to offset the waterfall to the left and right, but for me it didn't quite work. There was just too much boring empty space kind of around here. So what I've actually done is I've kind of centered the waterfall in the actual image, and I feel it actually works quite effectively. The leading line kind of runs up right through the middle. It's a surprisingly difficult place to actually photograph effectively though, because it's a really beautiful waterfall, but that doesn't automatically equate to a great place to actually take images. Now, the rain is really starting to come down now, so I'm going to have to be super quick to get these images, because that circular polarizer on the front of my lens is like a giant magnet for raindrops. Waterfalls tend to be fantastic to shoot on days like this for 3 reasons really. Firstly, they tend to be situated in areas that are more secluded and sheltered. So that means that you get yourself out of the worst, the wind and the rain. Secondly, rain usually means the rivers are running that little bit higher, so you're going to get more power, more drama in the waterfall itself. But thirdly, flat light, overcast conditions actually lend themselves fantastically well to even and balanced exposures of waterfall locations. I tend to find that my best images of waterfalls and woodland and glens are sometimes taken on the days that you least expect it. I'm very nervous doing these to camera vlog sequences while I'm walking after a certain tumble the other week. Thanks very much for joining me today. Drop your comments below on which of the images you prefer, and if you haven't yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Overall, it's been quite a productive day considering the weather's been absolutely useless. So really my key message as landscape photographers out there is never ever ever let bad weather put you off. You'll be very surprised what you can capture in the most rubbish of conditions. I'll see you all next week.